Roman was born to and raised in an artistic family. He loved poetry and music. His mother dreamed about him becoming a concert pianist. However, things never go as we plan in life. Now he lives and works in Australia. He is coming to share his story.
I was a little boy. My mother decided to send me to music school and even to private music lessons. She paid a lot of money. But I loved to play the piano. It was just a continuation of the family tradition, being an artist doing something. And my grandmother, who took care of me, and in fact, she was responsible for my education, she sent me to the religious lessons to Lutheran Church. They were the beginnings of learning about God. She taught me also to read from the old Polish translation of the Bible.
Roman, in those days that you are speaking of when you were a boy, Poland was a communist country then. Was it difficult to attend church services?
No, not at all. I have to tell you that I even don't agree with the saying that we were the communist country. You know, it was maybe in the 50s there was influence, but not later. It changed everything, and as I remember, you know, there was not a problem attending the church. There was not a problem going for religious lessons. There was not a problem of even selling literature, religious literature. I remember still the times that we put up the tables in the streets and sell to people, and people were interested, and nobody made any problem. So it was not so hard. I think that the problem appeared only when some people started to do something against the system, against the politicians. But usually, you know, religion was treated like a private thing, and you know there was not such a great influence of communist thinking, you know, on the Christians who wanted to attend the church and attend the religious lessons.
So, Roman, you were raised as a Christian then, believing in God?
Well, in a way, I was raised, but I don't believe that we can be raised as Christians. You know, to be the Christian, that's your personal decision, and that's something what had to happen in my life. I was a Christian formally, but you know, just at the time as I was nearly 18, you know, there was a time for my matriculation exam. I lost my faith in God. I was not sure that He exists. So even I performed and lived like a Christian, something was the kind of emptiness in my heart, and I was looking for something. There was a period between this exam that I mentioned and the starting the studies at the university, and that time, you know, I was putting myself in many different activities, especially artistic. You know, I was composing some songs for my cousin who sang them, and even one song was rewarded, you know, during the country competition.
Oh, wow.
And I was so proud of this, you know, but I noticed that there was no satisfaction in it.
What was your life like before you knew the Lord?
I could say nice and fun for a time, and then something missing. Then something, you know, that I couldn't find it. And you know, my experience was quite the same as many others, you know. Also my cousin, who was engaged together with me in cabaret, students' cabaret, composing, singing, doing it. He was looking for something better all the life. By the way, unfortunately, he's still looking for.
Is he still involved in the cabaret?
Not now, but still looking for something greater, for something better. And you know, but I found it. There was an interesting story, you know. In fact, once I attended one evangelistic meeting. There was a pastor who came to Bielsko-Biała, where I used to live, from
in
Krakow.
The south of Poland,
in the south
yes.
of Poland. And you know, he preached and made an appeal. I don't remember the appeal, but I felt something. Roman, you have to decide. You have to follow the Lord. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. You know, it stayed with me that I have to decide. It was not so easy, but anyhow, in the morning, I decided, not saying anything to my mother or to my grandmother, instead of going to Katowice to my studies, to go to Krakow, to meet this pastor, to tell him that I desperately feel I have to go forward. I have to decide for baptism. He was very happy. I was happy. And that was the end of the story. The problem was that I already knew the whole message. I already knew the truth from the Bible. But maybe you will be surprised, I didn't know Christ at all.
So you say it's possible for one to know the Bible, to know what it teaches, and to still not know the Lord?
Absolutely, it is possible. You know, sometimes Christianity is limited only to the theory. And in this way, that's easy to know something what the Bible says, where to find the verse. It's easy even to quote it by heart, but to don't know, in fact, what the verse means. And even more important, don't know Jesus. I experienced it. And I was good in theory unless I met him. And that was the point.
In 1971, you had the opportunity to travel to England, and differently from today, you traveled by train. I cannot fathom traveling 12,000 kilometers, all those miles by train.
Oh, that's fantastic. You could see for the first time the West Germany, what was impossible to do it, you know, and I know that now you can in 2 hours be there, but...
By plane, yeah, 2 hours.
By plane, yes, but you know, that was fun. There was the opportunity to read something, to meet some people, to talk to them.
And what happened while you were in England?
Well, there was another turn in my life. You know, but that's not connected with the religion so much. It's more connected with my English, because I didn't believe that I will use English at all. And one night, I dreamt. I don't remember the dream, but I remember that as I woke up, suddenly, well, it was in English. So if I dream in English, why not to speak? And I opened my mouth. And since then, you know, I didn't stop. You have the difficulty in asking questions because I'm talking and talking all the time.
In the past, during those communist times, so many people were trying to escape to the West. You were there and you could have stayed. What were your reasons for coming back?
Well, I tell you even more. You know, one of my friends organized the stay for me. He organized the studies. The reason's very simple. First, I was grown in a family that really respected the law, and I wouldn't do anything what was illegal. Second reason, I had my mom and my grandmother. I loved them very much here in Poland, and I said I would never dare to do something, staying there, not letting them know, and just disappearing from their life. There were two main reasons.
But you still loved music, didn't you?
Oh, that's true. You know, as you mentioned music, you know, that's something in me, and I love it so much. So I had a dream of being a conductor, of conducting the whole choirs, the orchestra, and suddenly they told me that it's impossible because I'm blind on one eye, so I will never read the music, the whole partiture. But I do, and it was still possible later.
Then very soon you reached a turning point in your life.
Yes, it just came, you know, automatically. I tried to express myself only using music, but never I would dare to speak publicly or to say, to share with my face, with something that happened in my life. And suddenly, you know, it came during my studies as one of the friends had the paper during history, studies of ancient history, the paper about Hammurabi's law, and he was enthusiastic. There was such a fantastic codex of law, and you know, and he said even the Jews, they just found their 10 commandments based on this law, and it was too much for me. That time, still stuttering and not being able to say a word fluently, publicly, I said, no, I don't agree.
Can you describe the change in your life when you went from a person not believing in God to a person who publicly defended his law?
Professor told me, well, Mr. Halupka, you will prepare call paper for the next week. I was so angry with my friend for this sentence that I was working for the whole week for this call paper, and the day came and I had to read it or present it. I have no idea what I was saying. I don't remember it, but it had to be something with sense that, you know, my colleague was asked to answer my call paper, and for few weeks or even few months, if I remember well, we were discussing on each week a little, just 15 minutes or 20 minutes about the same subjects. And after 3 months, I suddenly realized, well, for the first time in my life, I'm publicly preaching, defending God's law. And I said, well, God opened my mouth. Shouldn't I use it only for him, for his glory? So there was something that I could notice. I remember the change.
So after all of this, you came to the point where you considered the certainty of your salvation, which is a critical issue for each and every Christian.
That is true. You remember that I mentioned about this time that it takes, you know, to be the real Christian. I had one friend, she was studying with me history. And we loved to be together to study, to read the books and to prepare for different lectures. And you know, one day I started to share with her my faith. And you know, Teresa, that was her name, she said one day something that shocked me. She said, you know, as we are together and you share your faith, I feel that I believe like you. But as you disappear, I'm empty completely. And I said, well, what's happened with me? That's the problem. I started to think about it, and, you know, appeared suddenly the desire to be sure that, you know, I'm really saved and Jesus is my Savior. So what I should do. I was already baptized. I started to visit different pastors and ask the question about the assurance of salvation. I asked them, you know, can you tell me? And the answer usually is, no, never be sure, just hopeful. So I was so happy for the answer. So I was coming back, you know, to different people, and as they asked me, I said, no, you can only hope for. Unless I met my dear friends, there's Pastor Vlad Pollock. You know, I asked him the same question. And you know, Pastor Pollock has something very typical. He never answers straight. So he came to me and he said, you know, Roman, you know English, so I will give you the book so you can read, you'll find the answer. There was a book, Christ Our Righteousness, written by Arthur Daniels. I read the book and I found Christ.
Roman and I began to discuss this topic. I knew that he was really interested in it. It was at that time that I told him, among other things, that there is a fantastic book which has the answer to the questions which he asked me. The book is written by Arthur Daniels and is called Christ Our Righteousness. So he asked me if I had the book, and I said that I had a copy in English. He asked me if I could lend it to him, and I said that of course I could. So I took it from my library, I handed it to him, he read it and was fascinated by it, especially how it answered those difficult questions about salvation. He asked me if he could translate the book. I said of course he could. He translated it, and we made it available as a private project, not through any publishing company.
This book was so important for me because I said, well, I thought that if I found Jesus, for sure, I'm sure that some other people will find also Jesus, because of this book, I have to deliver this message to them. That's how it started. And it started also some problems. But, you know, for me, there was another step in being close to him and jumping nearly, say, yes, I have, you know, this wonderful assurance. Jesus saved me, and I know I'm saved.
I think that this was the second and most important turning point in your life.
That's true, you're right.
How does Jesus work in your life now? How do you communicate with someone who you can't see, who you can't touch?
Well, it may seem only difficult, but you know, we are accustomed nowadays to this. Let's say about the people who always open Facebook and communicate with many people they don't know, they haven't seen, and they still communicate. We're doing it using our cell phones, talking to some people, emails, you know,
messages.
different ways of communication. Jesus gives you much more because as he's present in your life, I mean, he occupies your thoughts, he occupies, you know, your heart, your feelings. That's something. Well, maybe the best example would be if I will mention my wife. You know, not always, as I'm traveling a lot, we are together, physically together, side by side. But for 36 years, we feel more close and loving much more than it was in the beginning. And we can communicate. Well, you can say, but you know your wife, you remember her. Well, but it's still, I don't see her, but I talk to her, and that's enough. It is possible. And I think that's the only way that we can really experience Christianity as it is, in fact.
You translated your very first book. It was the same book which helped you to meet Jesus. What happened with the translated text?
Well, the first moment I hesitated what to do with this. And you know, I started to type it on my typewriter with a carbon paper with many, many copies just to share with others. But you know, it didn't work. And one day, being in the city where I studied, I met my friend. We stayed in the same room in a hostel for some time. And you know, as usual, you meet somebody, you start to talk, you know, on some different things. So I asked, what am I doing now? He said, well, I'm the manager of a printing house. I said, oh, well, that's nice, that's nice. He asked me what I'm doing, and that's finished. In the end, as we are just parting, he said, well, Roman, do you have something to be printed? Well, there was a time still that it was not legal to print anything in Poland because there was a censorship and you would have to ask and wait for a long time during the communist time. And, you know, so I just didn't take seriously what he proposed. But you couldn't believe the next week I met him again. We didn't see each other for a long time, for a few years. And suddenly we were meeting week after week. And after some conversation, he asked the same question. Roman, do you have something to be printed? I said, oh, no, I don't think I have anything, you know. And that was the end. And a week later, he met me again.
3 times.
And he asked the same question. And suddenly something, you know, there was a signal in my brain. And I said, wait a moment, you have a book. Why to type it so many times? He can do it. I didn't think about the fact that it was illegal. Well, illegal, there was nothing dangerous. There was wonderful books saying about Christ and salvation. And I gave him, and he printed 200 copies. And it was easily distributed among many people who wanted to read. And I was so happy. So the work was not in vain.
It's 1974 in communist Poland, and you're looking for a way to serve the Lord. You're wanting to spread God's word somehow. Can you tell me what happened?
Yeah, that was something great. You know, in fact, God has prepared the way that I didn't expect. Yes, I wanted to serve him, I wanted to do something, so we organized a small group of people. In fact, initially there were only 8 people who were singing only church hymns from the church hymnal, helping people to sing properly, because many hymns are not well known. But I don't know how it happened that we prepared, you know, some kind of a cantata that was entitled Jesus the Fact or the Legend. And in this way, we started to perform it. Working on this cantata, we decided to meet for a whole week in Zakopane, that's in the mountains in the south part of Poland. And you know, as we were there, during the week, we were practicing in the garden because there was such a beautiful weather. In fact, we started every day the practice at 7 o'clock in the morning, and we're practicing the whole days till evening. On Wednesday, I remember well, I took the whole choir for a concert of the Belgian choir that was in a concert hall in Zakopane. And as I did it, suddenly during the break, one man came to me asking if I'm the man who is conducting this little choir, chamber choir there in the garden. I was surprised, but he said, I was passing by and I heard. And as we started to talk, we'd talk about the concert, you know, about the Belgian choir. But later he just asked me if I will agree that he will come for a rehearsal. I agreed first, and then I started to ask him, tell me, what is your job? Why are you interested in music? Well, I do something with music. You know, that's not important. A little bit from time to time. And just to make the long story short, he appeared to be one of the conductors of the choirs of National Philharmonic Hall in Warsaw, and also a very famous academic choir from the Church of St. Anne.
Wow.
And you know, he started to work with us the whole week there, since morning till night. And that was not the end of this. He was practicing with us quite often, and in this way, he gave me the best lessons, practical lessons, how to conduct the choir and how to work with the choir.
Your eye problem, the blindness in your one eye, was no longer an issue?
That's true. And you know, I think that problems appear as we think about them as problems. But I was so much engaged in the kind of work, you know, with the choir, and it gave me such a joy that I forgot about the problem, and it was not a problem at all. I could read the music and I could conduct, there was not a problem. In fact, you know, this conductor that I mentioned before helped us to show our music in different places. He invited us for the music festival of religious music organized by the Roman Catholic Church. It's called Sacrosong. And that year, it was in '76, this Sacrosong was organized in Lublin. We went there and we sang. For the first time, having a few thousand people in front of us. And to our amazement, we were rewarded with a diploma from the Cardinal Karol Wojtyla, who just 2 years later was elected as a pope.
In 1978?
In 1978.
So we can say that God brought you back to the music that you loved so much, but in a different way.
Yes, and I think that God is specialist in this. He changes our plans, or maybe he respects them, but do it in his way, and that's wonderful. But there is one condition. We have to be with him all the time in some kind of a union. We have to pray, we have to study the Bible, but just tell him what we desire, and if we honestly desire, you know, to follow him and to be faithful, he does his work.
During the time when he was a student, he was also involved in a church outreach ministry, which was done by our music group. It became such a high priority that matters of his private life took second place, even to the point that instead of finishing his university studies, he put all his energy into this music ministry. It wasn't until years later that he finished his degree, because back then he felt that what he was doing was more important and he didn't have time to finish his degree. You have to remember that he was studying during the time that our country was deep in communism, and the educational system was completely different and resulted in something completely different that what we were experiencing together as a group. Our ideas were completely different than anything that could be found at universities. For us back then, the ministry which we had taken up as young people, that Roman led out as our conductor, was the most important thing in our lives. Everything else took second place to it, even our families and our private lives. Our goal was to witness, to be among the people and ready to serve them.
So for the next 14 years, you were very active as a musician, as a conductor.
Yes, it's true. And it was really the main part of my life. You know, in fact, I used to say that God has prepared a special school for me. I didn't think that I will conduct a choir. I mentioned before, you know, that there was my dream to be the conductor of the symphony orchestra. But suddenly, you know, I had a choir of 25 people, and we started to be so close friends, and it was wonderful. They were working, traveling from the whole country, meeting only twice a month, and we are giving concerts mainly in Roman Catholic churches. I remember there was altogether about 750 concerts for during these 14 years. And there were not only the concerts, because we sang a lot of musicals, but that's not the main meaning of that. I was preaching that time.
You mean Christian musicals, right?
Oh yes, Christian musicals. And you know, I was preaching, having this 1,000 people in front of me. You know, I was sharing the truth and just in between songs. And God has prepared me to be an evangelist, and it was great.
At about this time, you began focusing on family ministries with lectures and seminars. What motivated you to do this, to start focusing on such family matters?
Well, the answer is very simple. My family. As you know, Dorothy, I have 4 children. You know, and as I noticed the children, you know, were growing, they needed, you know, the well-educated parents. So I started concentrating on parenting. Then the children had grown, and you know, they started to look a little longer for some girls, for some boys. Then, you know, the father started to prepare something about courtship, you know, preparing for the family life. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, as they are married now, so I am doing everything for marriage. Not having Jesus on our side, or sometimes just carrying us in his hands, will not solve anything. We just think that we did, but it's not so. And that's my mission. That's what I try. I love people. I love to talk to them and to share with them there is a solution. There is something great they can have. And that's probably the main sense of our life. In his heart, a man plans his way, but the Lord determines his steps.